Okay, so basically, my understanding of Death Me Not Proud is, as Miss was saying last class, is that there's a man and he's basically trying to belittle or to curse. What was the right
Like
word?
talk down.
Talk down to
Talk
death.
down to death.
Okay, so to add on to what Brian was saying, my understanding of Death Be Not Proud, it's a poem in which the poet is talking directly to death, has personified death, and is talking directly to it. Basically requesting death to humble itself. Like Brian said, he kind of belittles death, looks down on death, and mentions almost in point form the problems that he sees, the things that don't necessarily make sense. And in the end, makes one final stab at death, saying that in the end it will suffer the fate of sealing out.
So we see this setup of like a logic versus death, or like a structured argument versus death, which is very interesting. So let's go line by line and share our thoughts on each line. So we'll start, of course, with the title, Death Be Not Proud. Are we seeing anything interesting here in the title?
From the title, I can kind of tell that death is being personified. It's kind of being talked down on, as I said in the summary, because you would tell somebody be not proud, like it's kind of telling somebody humble yourself. You wouldn't just like death be not proud is basically telling death to humble itself, so you personifying death.
We can see that throughout the poem, the purpose of the personification of death is to, of course, as you said, to talk down to death, or to show death how insignificant, how human it is, actually, because we see some human attributes being cast onto death with pride here. Death is proud. We know that humans are typically proud. And so we see here why death is proud when we look at lines 1 and 2. Some have called thee mighty and dreadful. And so when you look at these two words here, mighty and dreadful, these two words kind of summarize our experience with death. We know that death is mighty because it can slay even the greatest man. Even the kings must at some point die. Even the greatest, the wisest of men will die. So death is mighty in that regard. And dreadful because, of course, death brings dread, terror, fear to mankind. But the speaker is saying here, death you only think, or people only think that you're mighty and dreadful, but you're not really so. Now, looking at lines 1 and 2, who can we say might be the audience of the poem? Who is the speaker speaking to?
I think it's being directed at death itself, because it says mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. So it's basically saying to death that it is not mighty or dreadful, if that makes sense.
All right, so the poem is, of course, being directed at death. And as we go down, we'll also notice that the poem is also directed at the sum here in line 1. So yes, we know that the poet is addressing death. Death, be not proud. But if we remember that death is only being personified, death isn't literally a person. So what could be the greater meaning, the greater message behind this poem? He might be telling us, those who find death to be mighty and dreadful. He might be telling us that, hey, we have no reason to fear death. We can overcome death. In fact, we have already overcome death. So I think the audience is kind of twofold, even on the surface. The speaker might be targeting death. Of course, he speaks directly to death. And he's also targeting those who fear death. And as we go down, we might also find out that the speaker is trying to convince himself that death does not need to be feared. All right, so death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkst thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death. So death thinks that it overthrows people, but these people do not actually die. What synonyms could we conjure up for overthrow? What is meant by overthrow here? It's a bit of a weird word. What does it mean to
Or conquer.
conquer? Yes, I think that's a better word than kill. The speaker could have said, those who you think you kill do not die, but he says overthrow. And why does he use the word overthrow as opposed to a word like kill or defeat or even destroy? We usually see death as a destroyer, as one who defeats, one who of course kills. But the speaker says overthrow here. What are the connotations that come to mind from this particular word, overthrow?
Okay, I believe the word kill was not used because usually that would be something death does. So you need to be able to use a word that describes overpowering something well, that's not in relation to death itself.
That's a very interesting point. The speaker is basically telling death, you're in this delusion. You think that you're mighty and great. Of course, mighty kings overthrow people, but you're not. And why aren't you mighty and great? Why aren't you dreadful? Because you cannot kill me. So we see that the speaker takes on a more personal outlook on his idea of death. He's saying that it's not only that you can't kill anyone, but me specifically, I am immune to you. I am unkillable. You cannot kill me. And then we see here some interesting metaphors. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be much pleasure. Then from thee much more must flow. What can we say about these lines in terms of the comparison of death to rest and sleep, as well as the form or structure of these two lines? Does anything come out? Anything of interest?
Okay, so from that line, especially the one before it, where it said, "Can't thou kill me?" and from rest and sleep, I think it really shows John Donne's religious beliefs that death is not the end. Death can't kill him because there's a life for him in the afterlife. So, eternal rest, eternal sleep. So, death cannot kill him because he knows that if death does, he's not really dead because he's expected an eternal rest, eternal sleep in the afterlife. So when he says that he can't kill me, it's because he believes in the afterlife. That's his faith. And it really shows in that specific part of the poem.
All right. That's a pretty good observation. So, because of the expectation of the afterlife, John Donne understands that death isn't really death, it's just a little pause. And we see here that, according to Donne, rest and sleep are pictures of death. In that, when you look at a picture, you can get a sense of what something looks like, of what something is. If you see a picture of me, then I will come to mind and you will know what I look like. So when you're looking at something like rest and sleep, you're really looking at pictures of death. And of course, rest and sleep are not mighty or dreadful, right? Rest and sleep aren't things that we think overthrow us. They're not terrible things at all. We enjoy rest and we enjoy sleep. In fact, we get pleasure from rest and sleep. Therefore, we're going to get much more pleasure from death. Because if rest and sleep are just pictures of death, imagine when we get the real thing, just how much pleasure we're going to enjoy. And I wanted to look at the structure here. The structure of these two lines can encapsulate the structure of the entire poem, where the poet is not speaking from emotion, but speaking from logic, going point by point. So if we get pleasure from rest and sleep, it therefore it follows that we're going to gain more pleasure from death. So it's a very logical argument there. So we're on to, and soonest our best men with thee do go. So the best men soonest go with death. So my question is, and there's no obvious answer. Who are the best men, and why do they go with death soonest? Why are they the first ones to go with death?
Well, my perspective of it is like, it almost seems like whenever somebody dies, especially someone who persons considered gifted in a particular way, whether it just be someone who's academically talented or like one of these famous actors, people usually tend to say, they're gone too soon, they died too young, or something like that, even if age-wise it may not necessarily be so. So I think because of what people will consider their best men, it almost seems as when they do die, it almost appears as if they're gone first, if that makes any sense. I think Jenny had some as well.
Since John referred earlier in the poem to death being kind of like rest and sleep, we'll probably say that the best men, so probably those in leadership and those who are famous, would be eager to go there because they kind of think of it as a rest and peaceful. So they would kind of die willingly because they think death is a good thing. It'll benefit them.
All right. Those are some.
Okay,
Anything else? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I would like to say something as well. Like Alana said before, saying that gone too soon it's very related to death. So that could be it. And another thing is, since the poet expresses his beliefs a lot, and since he does believe that there is life after death, maybe he could say that the best men, the best people are going first to experience the afterlife, the life after death, and so on.
I would also like to say something. I think that he may be referring to people possibly with good moral standards, or maybe brave people, or people who make sacrifices, which usually ends in death for those type of people.
So yeah, these best men. I remember um I asked some lit teachers, who do we think these best men are? Because students are gonna ask who these best men are. We need an answer. We need some kind of consensus. I was just teasing them because there's no such thing as a consensus in a poem, and I basically got all of these answers that you guys just provided, and my personal two meanings came to mind initially. I thought about war heroes for some reason. Perhaps I was thinking about Dulce et Decorumist. I think I just read that poem, and so I was being influenced by what's his name? Wilfred Owen. These best men might have been, valiant soldiers who would have died in battle. They might have been. Of course, they die young, so the soonest could be in a literal sense in that they're young. But I think an answer that I prefer is the best men are whoever we see as close to us, whoever we hold dear, whoever we love. So the best men will be different from person to person, because even if you die at 100, if you're a best man or a best woman in my eyes, then it's still gonna be too soon. So that's what I think is happening there. We always say gone too soon, as you guys mentioned. And if we consider someone to be good or to be great, to be brilliant, then even if they die at a ripe old age, we're still gonna say that they went too soon because we could have used more time with them. All right, so from rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, blah blah, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls delivery. So we see that the bones of these best men get some rest, and we know that the bones aren't just the bones, but the body, the physical existence, this shell that we have, is rested in that we are lowered into the grave and our body decays. But John Donne doesn't seem to be overly concerned with the body. He seems to be more concerned with the soul. The body gets some rest, but what about the soul? What can we say happens to the soul at death, based on what John is saying here?
I think this, well, when the person dies and the body's going to rest, the soul, it'll leave their body and go to the afterlife. That's the line of the soul's delivery. So wherever they end up based on their religious beliefs, that's where they're going.
Hmm. So the soul is delivered to the afterlife then. Delivered like a package. All right. That's okay. But I want us to look a bit deeper on soul's delivery. Soul's delivery. What else can we get from this word?
Um, can I say something real quick?
Yes, of course.
I think it is. I think it is possible that when he says soul's delivery, it could mean like your soul is reborn in a way of maybe purification. So not necessarily delivered to the afterlife, but delivered as in being at peace.
Um,
That's interesting.
if I could also add, if I could also add something, it's almost like death is the means by which the soul is able to get transported or like purified. So death is that mode by which all of these great things can occur, and so it's considered the soul's delivery because it's that mode, that method of the soul being changed or brought to where it will in the end.
Yeah. That's good. And so I think Don used quite a versatile word here in delivery. He could have chosen um, many other words, but he used deliver to capture a variety of meanings, I believe. And so I think we can find perhaps three main meanings from delivery. Of course, we have the most obvious meaning, which is the soul is transported to the afterlife, which is fine. The soul gets transportation, and also the soul is delivered in the sense that it is changed or renewed, or it is given a new opportunity. And then, of course, delivery in the sense of a baby being delivered, or someone delivering a baby. The soul is also being born. The soul is also being born. And so when you look at especially poems like these, written centuries ago, we have to check the diction, because usually, these poets spend perhaps years writing these poems, just editing out words and editing in words that can fill multiple roles. So when we look at words like overthrow, like delivery, we have to wonder, why did the poet choose this specific word and not other synonyms? Because other synonyms might not have given, such a variety of meanings. So we see that death is being belittled from the beginning here, and the belittling of death comes to a head here. The word slave. So death all along has been seen as a kind of servant. Death comes and he gives us rest and pleasure and whatnot. But now death is demoted to being a slave, which is even lower than a servant. So the word slave, and we see that death is slave to four things apparently: faith, chance, kings, and desperate men. Does anyone want to come in and tell us what these four slave masters mean, or expound a little bit on these four elements that are in some way a master of death?
Well, to expand on it with knowledge gained from when I watched your video, I know that in terms of fate as well, I guess we all know this already. Fate is something, it's kind of like destiny. It's basically something that is meant to happen, will always happen. That's your path. Chance, it's more like luck, almost like, well, literally kind of like chance, exactly that. It's not guaranteed. It may happen, it may not. But that is something that usually when it does happen, either bad, either good, but pretty much a 50-50 chance. Kings, well, they're the first human slave master mentioned. They're, one of the considered the top tier amount of humans, kings who rule over other people, who are the people who are top of society. They're rich, they're powerful. And then desperate men, that's basically considered the lowest of the low. These people are people that, they live fighting tooth and nail they'll do anything to get everything. These people are looked down upon even by humans ourselves. So by the poet phrasing them in this way, it highlights, I think, the wide range of slave masters that has, because usually even in history, when we learn about slaves, it was usually dedicated to one person, but death is almost a Paul. He has so many people he has to answer to.
Yeah.
Also, it gradually gets worse and worse for him in terms of who his masters are. Like fate is usually seen as all powerful. It was meant to be. This is my destiny. This is mine. Desperate men isn't even close to that interpretation, or doesn't even hold a similar ideal in our eyes as humans. So by going from fate to chance, kings to desperate men, not only does it show the wide range of slave masters that has, but it also shows that his slave masters aren't even credible, some of them. So I think it's really gradually demoting death and really showing off that, hey, you're not that powerful, because the people who you answer to aren't even close to that standard anyway.
Okay, I have something to add as well. So we all know the poem. He's telling death not to be proud. He's belittling death. So right there, he's saying that death is just something so little that he cannot even choose. Death can't choose who he wants to get. So by fate and by chance, it's kind of comparing that. Death cannot pick and choose who he wants to get. So kind of say it's fate, kind of say it's a chance, and the kings and the desperate men. So it can be either or. It can be someone in a high ranking, it can be someone in a low ranking. And the next is saying that death is so little that something as simple as poison, war, and sickness can do just what it does. So it's another stance that is really just belittling death in the worst way.
Okay, so I also think that like as they belittle death like very much, because fate and chance, these are out of human control, right? So death, like with death feels like, oh, it's a little higher because humans don't have any control. But the last two, these are humans. Now he has to answer to humans. He's a slave to humans. The very thing he is so proud of being able to kill.
Yeah. Wow. These are some really brilliant points. And we're not even looking at the devices because we're working with a short time. But we're picking out some interesting ironies in seeing that, death, who is acting like it is a king who overthrows people, is actually a slave to the very kings that he's pretending to be one of. And then you guys mentioned some interesting points about the ordering of the slave masters from fate to desperate men. But there's another interesting observation that wasn't even in the analysis video that I posted. The first slave master here is fate, which gives us this sentence that we can look at almost by itself. Thou art slave to fate. So even if we forget about everything else, thou art slave to fate. This is really perhaps alluding to here. What is the fate of death? So in many senses, we consider death to be our fate, in that we're fated to die, we can't escape death, blah blah blah. But the speaker is saying, what about your fate? Aren't you a slave to fate? You're acting as if you are the one who controls fate. You are the one who creates our fate. But the fact is, your fate is already set in stone, because you're going to die, after one short sleep. That's it. So while we don't even know how we're going to die or when we're going to die, death already knows that its death is put down, just waiting for it. So it's slave to fate in the fact in two ways. One, we know that when people die, it's not really death's decision, but the decision of fate, a higher power. And also, death has its own death waiting for it, in that it is also a slave to fate, just as it thinks we are a slave to fate. And then we look at some other kind of slave masters of death, or some company that death keeps, when we go into the next line, and doth with poison, war, and sickness dwell. We know that when poison and war and sickness are introduced, then death might follow. And of course, we see these things in the same light in which we see desperate men. Despicable. It's nothing we want to really be a part of. It's nothing. We don't really consider sickness to be a great, mighty king. We consider it to be something disgusting, something we should avoid. So the speaker is saying, not only are you a slave, but you're not even a good-looking slave. You're not even keeping good company. So we see that the speaker goes from belittling death to downright disrespecting death. And now he's going to take away the one thing that death has going for itself. Death knows that, oh, okay, well, at least I can bring sleep. Even if I can't kill anyone, don't take away my ability to make people sleep. I'll accept that. But then the speaker says, hold on, you're not even getting that much credit. And popular charms can make us sleep as well. So when it comes to sleep, it's not even as if you are the best sleeping agent. So we have already clarified that you can't kill anyone. All you can do is give us sleep, which we like. We like sleeping. Death is not even the best at making us sleep. Poppy, we know this is referring to poppy seeds used to create opium, these drugs that can induce deep sleep, like comas and so on. So if we want to sleep, we can use drugs, we can use poppy, or we can use charms, whatever magical spells or artifacts or items. So when it comes to sleeping, you're not even the king of sleep. So what are you good at, essentially? What are you known for? Where is this pride coming from? You can't kill us, you can't overthrow us, you're a slave, you're a servant, and the one little thing you can do, you're not the best at doing that. And so we have this rhetorical question laced with sarcasm. Why swellest thou then? Why are you swelling up your head, seeing that you're not good for anything, essentially? And then we have the two last lines. One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more, death thou shalt die. And in the analysis video, I go a bit in more in depth on the forms, zuras, and so on here. But do you have any thoughts on, because I just skipped over these last lines, I'm worried about the time, but any interesting ideas on these last couple of lines?
Okay, so when Alana was describing desperate men as the lowest of the lowest society, I was also thinking of maybe people who have terminal illnesses. They could be considered desperate or desperate to live. So they try to get this treatment, that treatment. They pay this much money because they're desperate. They don't have any other choice. So then maybe they're saying that, oh, death is a slave to them because they're constantly like fighting and pushing it away and putting it off with these different treatments in a sense. And yeah,
Mm.
and also the last two lines that say, "One short sleep pass, you wake eternally." I think what Joel was saying before, his belief in the afterlife, that's referencing it as well, because he believes that the whole reason why he doesn't fear death is probably because he believes that he doesn't die, he goes to the afterlife. So when he says one short sleep pass, it means that like he'll quote unquote die, his body will die, but he will eternally be awake and go on to the afterlife. You know what I'm saying? Yes, thank you.
So the last two lines, I feel like the poet is really telling Jeff that he will basically one day not have a job because the one short sleep, like his one job that he actually has is to make people sleep, and he's not even good at the job. And when he does do the job, it's like a very little job that it doesn't really affect the grand scheme of things, and it won't really affect us because our souls will move on and they will be transformed, right? And then after all of that, the last line, he will basically not have a job, and, and that's what the author is telling us.
Yeah. So the death is gonna be unemployed at the end. Very interesting. And the connection made by the previous student to between desperate men and those who are sick, that's something I missed in my many readings of this poem. So that's very interesting. The desperate men aren't only Yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Also, referencing what she just said, I
Mhm.
also thought that the short when death kills people, like from the line before, it said something about death cannot even make people sleep. So I
Mm.
felt that they tried to belittle death again by saying the sleep isn't even that long. So when he kills them, they wake up and then they live eternally, so they don't actually die. And then the last two lines saying that death has nothing to live off of, so eventually it will die because everyone is just sleeping, waking up eternally.
Yeah, yeah. That,
I
that that
want
that
to
sums it
add
up. Go
one
ahead, go
last
ahead.
point for myself before my other classmates goes. I feel like these last few lines really brought together what I was saying about the poet and his beliefs. Comparing death to a short nap was just like one final, extremely belittling blow to death. Because he's saying like, I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to wake up in a while, and then I'm going to be up, living it up in the afterlife, and you're just going to be gone. So while I'm happy, living happily ever after, you're gone, you're death. Imagine death is death, death is dead. So I feel
Mm.
like the ending, it's just such a great ending. I
Yeah,
have to admit, ending just amazing.
yeah.
What I got from the last two lines, I think to echo what most persons were saying, it's basically saying that in a sense that we are better than death in that we get the chance to live eternally while death dies. So there's that sort of separation from ourselves from death. I am also getting from the last line, and death shall be no more, death thou shalt die. Going back to line 9, thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, where fate would be um, the most important or the most prominent slave
Hmm.
master, I put that in quotes, is now saying that the fate of death is to die. That's sort of said explicitly there. That's what I'm taking from it. And I also find it interesting that that is one of the first times that in the poem we're being mentioned. So we wake eternally. So it's not necessarily speaking to death or
Hmm.
to say or speaking about death in that sense. It's basically saying we. So I take the we to mean us as people, including the author himself. So that's what I got from the last two lines of that poem.
Excellent. That is amazing. That's
I
amazing.
have
Yes, go ahead, go
I
ahead.
have one question.
Hmm.
It's not about any of the lines in the poem, but more of your personal opinion.
Hmm.
Do you think it's possible that the writer wrote this poem not because he actually believes he can defeat death, but maybe more out of comfort for himself,
1000%.
especially since people don't actually know? Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, I 1000%. It's a solid argument, an excellent argument. But an argument like this comes from, I believe, it's just personal. There's no evidence. But an argument like this comes from a personal need for reassurance. When I want to convince, when I make a bad decision and I spend some money and I say, boy, I have a loan to pay back for 5 years and all I got, was this out of it. I need to create the most logical possible argument to tell myself that I was right. And so this over reliance on logic and structure, and even we see the speaker is going all out to not even give death a chance to respond. He's just badgering death. So it might come from his personal need to be okay with dying. So definitely that's a good point. Yeah, and we see at the very end that we see both audiences come into play here at the end. Remember, we said earlier that we have a couple of audiences. We have death being maybe the audience on the surface, but the main audience is I think the we here. We wake eternally. So the poet, of course, is speaking to us. We're gonna wake up eternally. He's not even talking about death anymore because death is already dead, essentially, in his mind. Death shall be no more. He's referring to death in third person, so he's not speaking to death here. And then he turns and says, "Oh, by the way, death, yeah, you shall die." Just almost as an afterthought, just adding insult to injury. And in the video I posted, I talk a lot about how the punctuations and perhaps capitalization and so on work, so to bring this to life.
Okay, so Jemima wants to say something to you before we close off. So we just wanted to thank you for coming today and sharing your expertise with us. And we just want to say we appreciate it very much, and that we look forward to the next time we can meet. And what? And yes, just thank you again for sharing and allowing us to share with you our points and what we think. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. You ladies are brilliant. I didn't have to do much. You guys had all the points, even some points
So
that I
what?
hadn't thought of.
So
What's
we're
that?
going to give you the real. We're going to give you the real SJC. Thank you. Who's doing it on the count of two, Shade? 1, 2.
Bigger father.
Yeah.
And again.
Yeah.
And again.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. That is awesome. I don't know what you just said, but it sounded awesome.
We said big up Adam Webb and
Oh,
again and again and again.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.